Hello and welcome to the second edition of Miguel Delaney's Inside Football. As I explained in the intro to the first one, it is a new video or podcast companion to my newsletter, also called Miguel Delaney's Inside Football, and will serve as both kind of a column or reaction on the weekend's action, and also a video exploration of a lot of the headlines in football. And the biggest on Tuesday morning is that Ousmane Dembele has won the Ballon d'Or. It was widely expected, but I'm not sure widely agreed on. I'd have to say that I'd be along those lines. I don't think he should have won it. I think Lamine Yamal should have won it. It does feel with this, we've gone fully from the Messi-Ronaldo era to a modern equivalent of Florian Albert or Allan Simonsen. Now, they might be two football names who aren't that familiar to maybe some modern listeners, and that perhaps proves the point. This isn't to be disrespectful to them, or even to kind of, I suppose, only speak to those who maybe aren't as in tune with football history. Because even from the vantage point of football history, we're not exactly talking about previous winners like Johan Cruyff or Franz Beckenbauer, or even Omar Savori, who was brilliant in Serie A. There's maybe that element of a winner in Dembele, and he is the 47th different winner to claim this competition, of... Well, if he won't really be celebrated from the vantage point of history, there's an element of trying to make the present fit. I mean, ultimately, in great contrast to the Messi-Ronaldo era, there's no obvious winner. For me, there is one obvious winner, but he didn't have the obvious achievements like winning the biggest trophies, like a major men's tournament or the Champions League. And it does feel in those kind of years sometimes, and when there isn't, or there hasn't been, kind of the outstanding world player, the voters almost make the winner fit a certain degree. And it's hard not to think that actually happened with Dembele. I mean, if you break it down, Paris Saint-Germain won the Champions League from a second half of the season run. And in that second half of the season, which of course coincided with the knockouts, Dembele was their joint top scorer with 4 goals in those knockouts. Now, of those, 2 were genuinely decisive and massive goals. One against Liverpool in the last 16, another against Arsenal in the first leg of the semi-final, and 2 were against Brest, another French team that Paris Saint-Germain absolutely demolished, bringing all their greater financial advantage to the fore in a manner that really seems like it shouldn't count for an award like this. And also kind of reflects the other element where Dembele has sort of won it for a handful of games rather than the breadth of a season, because ultimately Paris Saint-Germain just will cruise to the Champions League. I know it sounds so dismissive of a league like that to not consider performances in it, but we are talking about a situation where a team just has this, because of its state ownership, has this almost kind of obscene financial advantage over all of the opposition. So it does feel like it's been made to fit, and those 4 goals certainly, they feel very thin when you consider some of the players who haven't won the Ballon d'Or in this millennium alone. Xavi, Iniesta, Thierry Henry, Paolo Maldini, they've all been on the podium. Even more recently, Robert Lewandowski, Mohamed Salah or Erling Haaland. They've all had far better claims than Dembele. Now, some of that is, of course, just the luck of who you happen to be against in a given year. Certainly that was the case for anyone that went up against Ronaldo and Messi. Some of it, I think, is it's always actually, some of it's down to the tension of what the Ballon d'Or actually is. Is it a most valuable player award, an MVP, as they say in the States, and as the Ballon d'Or has very much tried to appropriate that sort of discussion? Or is it an award to recognise the player that is actually talented and the best in football? Now, that's always a little hoary, because the most talented really, it still depends on how you apply that talent, and then you have to get in and where you apply that talent. So it's why I think the award has actually always been a combination of the two, those kind of two concepts. Some of that is obviously subjective, some of it has obviously been beyond debate, and really the Messi and Ronaldo years, it always was a combination of the two and beyond debate. Both of them, naturally, because what they were performing to a level high above anyone, and they were directly delivering the biggest trophies in the game. And even if you take the view that Messi is, I take the view as I do, that Messi was, to be honest, a far better player than Ronaldo, and perhaps the greatest player of all time, Ronaldo obviously had a justified claim every year he won it. In fact, 4 of the 5 victories came as he was also winning the Champions League and scoring major goals on the way to the Champions League. So again, a lot of players are just unlucky to be in the same year as them. But equally, I do wonder whether Dembele has been a little bit lucky actually to be in the same year as one player who is an obvious potential successor to that glory era. But maybe, unlike them, Ronaldo and Messi, they all won it. They won it in their prime, even if that prime was very long. And Yamal, maybe, I wonder, is there a slight bias against youth here? The sense that he has to rise to his prime. And I think that is maybe revealed by the fact that no one under the age of 21 has won the Ballon d'Or. I think Yamal would have been the first teenager to win it and the youngest player by 3 years. And I think there's maybe an element, especially because he won the Copa Award tonight, which is the younger player award, an element of having to kind of rise there, which is maybe why he one of the reasons he missed out. But if you just look on performances alone, I think it's obvious that he's the best player in the world right now. He's performing to a higher level than anyone else, as is showcased by the fact that, after 150 years of football history, where it feels like we've seen everything, Yamal is doing things, especially with that kind of clipped finish or cross with the kind of instep, that people couldn't have imagined, that some of his peers couldn't have imagined. And he's also applying that at the highest level. I mean, his performance in the game against Inter alone, in the first leg in particular, was incredible. It was of a Messi level. We know he can do it at that repeatedly, given he did it at the Euros, which obviously fell outside this year's jurisdiction, if you like. And all of this was applied, say, to the women's Ballon d'Or, Aitana Bonmati. It does feel like that Yamal didn't win it because he didn't win the Champions League, which is really the only difference with Dembele. But that didn't apply to Bonmati. And I think it's right it didn't apply, because, again, all of the same arguments could apply to her as they would with Yamal. She is the best player in the world. She's doing things others can't imagine. She's applying it to the highest level, as we saw in the Champions League semi-final against Chelsea, the Euros semi-final against Germany. And like Yamal, it's not her fault that her team ultimately didn't win. She did more than anyone to try and make them win. But of course, Aitana's victory tonight was her 3rd Ballon d'Or, which is sort of that kind of gold standard achievement. Cruyff won 3. It's always been that kind of, or Beckenbauer won 3, that level that players appeal to historically. And that also, I think, makes a vote more palatable if they haven't won the biggest honours. But even if you put it down on its own binary terms of Dembele against Yamal, I think Yamal performed to a higher level and he did more for his team. For me, it really is that simple. And it does feel like it just came down to maybe subjective elements of the voting. On that voting, there has been a lot of talk, and I wrote about this in my newsletter, that the lobbying for the Ballon d'Or has been more aggressive than ever. Now, that maybe fits as well with how I think the way the award has evolved, and I suppose this goes hand in hand with this tension about not knowing what it is, and especially with the way so many players now want it as an individual award beyond anything else, rather than something that is a bonus after winning Champions Leagues. And that, because, the Ballon d'Or used to have this sort of old world gravitas and traditional prestige that I actually found very appealing, and it was this kind of almost esteem to the voting, where it's evolved. And if the European Cup alone, the glare of the European Cup alone was influential in the voting, it fits in how it has evolved into something that feels a lot more about glamour, a lot more about kind of a gaudiness, and suitably the actual Ballon d'Or itself, the trophy that they spoke about, how much it weighs 12 kilo as part of the ceremony. That's actually become much more ostentatious. If you look at the old photos of Johan Cruyff or George Best holding it, it's this humble little orb that doesn't look like the modern one at all, and that does feel symbolic in many ways. And yeah, it's given all of that, given the lobbying, given the fact that maybe that Yamal is still a teenager, it's hard not to feel that it didn't recognise maybe the best player in the world right now. You know, Dembele did a lot. I mean, and none of this is to be disrespectful towards his contribution. To score 2 decisive goals in the Champions League knockout like that is substantial, especially that one in the semi-final against Arsenal. And the one against Liverpool, actually, I mean, given they would have gone out without it. I mean, we are talking about substantial achievement here. But it does, in the context of history, in the context of what the Ballon d'Or is supposed to be, in the context of the level of the player, I think, as well, it does feel a little thin. And I think Yamal would have been the more rightful winner. In fact, to add to that, I actually think Kvaratskhelia was more influential in Paris Saint-Germain's Champions League victory than Dembele. But for me, Yamal is on a higher level. And I think he will go on to prove that in the future. I suppose there's maybe another argument there. People will say in Spain maybe that it's probably better for Yamal's development that a teenager didn't win this award so soon. But then, given Yamal's quality, I don't think he's looking at this in terms of a single Ballon d'Or. I think he's looking at it in terms of what Messi and Ronaldo have done and winning multiple. And I suppose that is maybe the difference in a discussion like this. Talk to you later. Oh, and please like, subscribe, all of that, and comment please as well. Thank you.